Good evening and welcome to Hello It's Us, Perspectives on Inclusion. This program is dedicated to educating the general public about issues that are important to people with disabilities, but we feel that those very same issues are important to all of you because people with disabilities certainly are a part of the general public. Hello It's Us is brought to you through a collaboration between the University of Iowa Center for Disabilities and Development, our friends at Uptown Bill's Coffee Shop, and the good people at Public Access TV. My name is Mike Hoenig. I work for the Center for Disabilities and Development as a program coordinator, and I serve as a co-host for Hello It's Us. Keith?
My name is Keith Ruff. Yeah, that's a co-op. And like I previously said, my book is almost finished, and I'm still very strong disability advocate in the area.
Great. Well, we're pleased to welcome back for the second portion of our feature on voting, Carrie Nierling from the Johnson County Auditor's Office. She's the Deputy Auditor of Elections, and Rick Shannon has joined us from Des Moines once again. He is the Public Policy Manager with the Iowa Developmental Disabilities Council. So welcome back, both of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
I'd like to share just a little bit about yourselves, and then we'll just jump right into the voting discussion again.
Sure. I'm still Carrie Nierling, and I have been in this position overseeing elections in Johnson County for about the last 3.5 years. So I'm responsible for everything that happens more or less with elections, including making sure that all of our polling places are accessible and making sure that we have all the required accessibility equipment for voters to use at the polling place.
Rick?
And Rick Shannon, I work with the Iowa Developmental Disabilities Council. I've been there 21 years. For viewers who aren't familiar with the council, we're a federally funded state agency that works at a policy and systems change level to increase opportunities for people with developmental disabilities to live, learn, and work in the communities that they choose. So basically to have all of the same opportunities that people without disabilities enjoy.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. We were in the middle of a great discussion last week on the shortening of the period prior to election when people can start voting. So, and I think Rick had introduced that topic, and Carrie, you had some thoughts on it, and just clarify for us if you could. Is this for any type of early voting? Is it specific to absentee voting?
Sure. So for any type of voting, we're not able to have any ballots either be mailed out or people vote in person in our office or at satellite locations until 29 days before an election. This is not just for a general election. This will apply to all elections. Typically, we don't have voting before that period of time for another election, so it really comes into play most often with the general election. Previously, until this year, the voting period was at 40 days before the election date. So it has been shortened by 11 days. Rick didn't touch on this, but the other thing that was shortened as well with this legislation was that the deadline to request a ballot by mail was also pushed back. It used to be for the Friday before the date of the election, so Friday at 5 p.m., but basically 4 days before the election. Now it's at the same date as the pre-registration deadline, which is a week earlier than that. So we lost 11 days on the front end and a week on the back end, or 11 days on the back end and a week on the front end as well. So that period of time now is a lot shorter, especially for people who do rely on absentee by mail, and I think that there's a lot of people in the disability community that do use vote by mail as their primary source of voting. So that last week, they'll be unable to request a ballot that way, and they'll have to find another way to vote, whether it's to come into our office and vote or to go to the polling place on election day.
Rick,
Yes.
when we left last week, I was going to ask you, Carrie, do you think the voter ID cards are dampening the enthusiasm of voters to vote negatively?
Carrie?
Well, I think that there's certainly a lot of concern by people, and that they won't be able to vote, that they'll show up to vote and they will be turned away because they don't have what they need to have. There's a lot of, I'm not sure how much, since it's brand new, I'm not sure how much confusion there still is. There's been a lot of effort to bring everybody up to speed on what they have to have, but I think that people are naturally a little nervous. Am I gonna have what I need to have? Will they tell me I can't vote? And especially, this might be something that affects people with disabilities more often that maybe don't drive. They don't have a driver's license, so if I don't have a driver's license, maybe I don't have a non-operator ID. What about this magic card that I'm supposed to get? What if I didn't get that and I don't have a photo ID? And it just introduces another level of uncertainty, I think, for a lot of people.
I agree with what Carrie said, and I think among people with disabilities, there's just a lot of confusion. And that's in part why we do what we do with our investment in election participation, because if we expect people with disabilities to navigate those kinds of changes, then we have an obligation to be informing them about what those changes are so that we can better prepare them as voters, because none of us like going into a situation feeling unprepared. We like to know what we can expect, and I think the voter ID law has created some new expectations for people, and that can be threatening. It can be more disenfranchising for some people. So, we want to try to set the record straight for people so that they have a good idea how to prepare.
Okay, so let's talk about a couple of those issues. And either of you can answer this, but in terms of accessibility, I know that sometimes people will maybe concerned that, well, gosh, I'm not sure if my polling place is even accessible. What provisions, now I know, Carrie, you mentioned earlier about, what part of your job is to make sure that all the polling places are accessible. Are there, without going into great detail, is the HAVA, or are there other laws, maybe the ADA even, in place that would require that each county provide an accessible polling place?
Yes, it's governed by HAVA, which for polling places in many cases can be even more stringent than the ADA in terms of requirements. And every precinct is required to be accessible under those guidelines put forth by HAVA. So what we do in the county to make sure that that is the case is, most recently, we don't do it every year, but every couple of years we try to go out to all of our polling places and do a new survey. It's about a 4 or 5 page document with all sorts of questions that specify, things like the slope of sidewalks, are there railways, are the doorways wide enough to be accessible for a wheelchair, and all sorts of things like that. Are buttons on an elevator at a level where someone in a wheelchair would be able to push them themselves, and all sorts of things like that are included in this HAVA survey. The last time in 2016 we went and we did every single place that we voted at all 57 precincts. And then every year of a general election, we are required to reach out to all of our polling places and ask them if there have been any changes, any sort of construction, any sort of updates, anything that may have affected what we already have on record from our survey, that we would go out then and do another survey. Anytime we switch polling places, we do a survey. And sometimes we find out that there hasn't been any construction, but for example, we were in a building and the ground has settled around it. And so what previously was acceptable in terms of slope and a gap in the sidewalk was no longer accessible. And we would never have known that had we not gone out and checked, because they said, oh no, we haven't had any construction. Well, they haven't, but they're sinking. So we take that very seriously. We make very sure that every place that we voted in this county meets all the required elements of the HAVA, and not just what's required. We're actually looking to make sure that it makes sense and it's just keeping with the spirit, not just checking off a checklist. Yeah, so it actually meets all the requirements, but is this a good site for someone with disabilities to vote in? Does it make sense? Is it easy for them to access it, not just is it possible? And in some locations, I will be honest, in some locations, it's less easy than others. They're all accessible, but some places are just going to be easier than others depending on the facilities that we have available. in a particular precinct. And there's cases where we've moved out of a precinct into an adjoining precinct because there's no accessible location. And we're okay with that, and hopefully all our voters understand that as well. And I think they're pretty reasonable when it comes to that situation. But I mean, we will move outside of the precinct if necessary to make sure that we have a polling place that meets the needs of people with disabilities.
That's great, and so the days hopefully of voting in the old second floor of the old elementary school are a thing of the past.
Yes, definitely, definitely.
Unless there's an elevator.
Yes.
Yes, that's true. I mean, we do have some places that have elevators, but, you know, there's many places, and it's something that we take seriously, even for our satellite voting locations. Those are also required to be accessible. So there are a lot of places, like, for example, at the university that don't really work anymore because it's not possible to set up an actual location where there's access, and that's fine with us. There's lots of places we can go, but I mean, it's not just on election day. It's throughout the whole voting process, whether it's in our office, whether it's at a satellite location, whether it's at your polling place. Everything has to meet the same sort of accessibility requirements.
One of the other things we've talked a little bit about is just the experience at the poll, or at the precinct itself. So I would be, and part of the issue that people have sometimes faced is that the poll worker may not be educated, whether it's about, you know, a machine, or, you know, the fact that we have accessible machines now, or, you know, I think we talked during the first episode a little bit about, you know, you can have poll worker assistance if you need to. If we didn't talk about it, I'll just say that people do want to come in and they don't feel comfortable with the machine, they can get assistance from poll workers in marking the ballot. But back before the days of accessible machines, I oftentimes used that strategy, and there were times when poll workers would comment on my selections, which I thought was a little strange. Do you? I know that there is poll worker training. I'm just interested to know if anything specifically within that training relates to people with disabilities, and I'm interested in that both from a county and state perspective. I mean, I know that there have been curricula developed at the state level for auditors to avail themselves of. So, be interested in hearing both of your perspectives on that.
Sure, I know for us, part of, we do what's called School of Instruction before every election with our poll workers, every major election, not always with special elections, but before every major election. And part of that is to go through the steps that you need for example, curbside voting. What do you do if someone comes in and asks for your assistance and they're inside the polling place? What are the measures for that? Because you can, you know, they can have someone of their choosing help them, they can have the bipartisan team help them, and we want to make sure that they understand this is what can happen, you know, and we talk to them about how to approach that, and, you know, sometimes, you know, they have to be understanding of the fact that people might not know this, so someone with a disability might come in with someone else, and they might be asking them for help. Well, they can't do that unless they sign an affidavit, and so we make sure that they know, hey, make sure that someone that they've signed off on that. And the reason for signing that affidavit is we don't want anyone to be unduly influencing someone, and so we want the voter to be able to sign off and say, yes, I'm asking this person for help, and so if they do that, then we know it's okay. So we make sure that they're aware of situations like that. We give them training on the accessibility machine. When we first got it, we gave them training at every school of instruction. We offer them training on it, particularly for our chair people. And I think, as we talked about a little bit in the first episode, we are encouraging people to use it who are not disabled. And I think that familiarity is also with the poll workers. As they're using it more, they're becoming more familiar with it, and they're more, I don't want to say what the word is exactly, but I don't know what the word is I'm searching for, but as they become more familiar with it, they're more apt to offer it to people and to know how to help people because they have used it themselves more often. And so that's the other side of benefit of having it being used by a wide variety of voters, is that our poll workers now are more familiar with it than the auto mark, which everybody knows. If we used it in 2 or 3 precincts in an election, that was a lot, you know. So So it's definitely something that's on our mind when we talk to our poll workers.
Cool. And I have a lot of confidence in Johnson County or Polk County and the way that they train precinct election officials. I think where people have run into issues with precinct election officials is that the training is on a county by county basis. So just like anything else, there are inconsistencies in that training, and I think probably the most frustrating experience for people with disabilities is precinct poll workers who are not educated about the rights of voters. Well, actually, let's just say the rights of voters, whether you have a disability or not. But with those basic rights, and probably the biggest challenge is their unfamiliarity with accessible equipment. A voter with a disability goes in, needs to use that piece of equipment, they ask for assistance, and the poll worker, there's nobody there that's familiar enough to really assist them to have access to that machine.
Well, if that happens, it's not gonna happen in Johnson County, but if it did happen somewhere, what should the voter do?
Well, I mean, if they're trying to vote and they're having difficulty with the poll workers not knowing how to help them, I would have them call our office.
Okay.
And they can let us know, hey, I'm having difficulty here, either while they're at the polling place, or, if they've left the polling place and they've cast about and they left the polling place, afterwards they can contact our office or email our office. We do have PEOs that are poll workers that go from precinct to precinct and they're even more familiar with accessibility requirements. So, if necessary, one of them could come. Someone from our office would be happy to come and help if that was a situation. But we always want to know if there's a voter with disabilities that has run into an issue, because it's a training issue on our end, and we want to make sure that they know what's going on.
Awesome. During the first episode, we talked a little bit about the different styles of types. Let's start this again, since I can. During our first week, we talked a little bit about the different types of voting machines, and we spent a fair amount of time talking about accessible machines, but we didn't really get the chance to demonstrate one. So Carrie has been kind enough to offer both of us a chance to experience using an accessible machine. Johnson County purchased new ones approximately when did that happen?
About a year ago.
About a year ago, okay. So I have voted with the Automark numerous times, but this, I guess, is cooler and fancier. So I am really excited to get this opportunity. And Keith, it sounds like this might be your first opportunity as well.
Yes.
So you're going to kick us off, and we'll just go ahead and head for the machines.
Okay.
Well, and I would like to mention too, when we talk about machines, the machine that you're going to be practicing on is one of 4 different machines that's certified for use in Iowa. So if you have viewers who see this and they think, well, that's not what the machine looks like in my precinct. They all have the same sorts of core functions, but they do look differently, and there are some differences in the way they operate.
Okay, so this one, Automark is still one, or is that no longer certified in Iowa?
It's still certified for sure, but it's not one of the new machines, right?
And I think there are only maybe a couple of counties still using it. That's pretty outdated equipment.
Is it? Okay. Well, what's the name of this piece of equipment
This
that we're
is
going to
called
be?
the Express Vote.
Express Vote. All right.
Okay.
Sounds quick.
It does.
Yes.
There we go.
Great. So the first thing you'll do is you'll take this ballot card, and it will go right in there. Do you want to put it in there? Or do you need some help with that?
I think I need
All right.
help.
And it goes in just like this. And this is the ballot it's blank as it goes in, but this device will mark it. It just takes it like that.
Okay.
Now it's loading the election for you. Okay, and so here's your selections for favorite superhero team. And if you don't like these colors, you can change it to contrast, so it's black on white with white on black background.
Yeah.
Or back to this, and if you need to have it zoomed in, it will zoom in.
That'll help. Yes.
Is that helpful?
Yes.
All right. Do you want to mark one yourself?
Yes.
All right.
I think I'll try.
So you just have to push next to the button that you want.
Right there.
You want me to do it?
Yes.
All right. Is it this one?
Yes.
The Incredibles? Good choice. Good choice. And so then you'd hit next,
Okay.
and then you can choose a park. Do you have a favorite park in Johnson County?
Hickory Hill.
Hickory Hills, right there. So after you do that, then it's going to give you a screen where it verifies that the selections that you've made are correct.
Yes.
And so you can see, yep, that's what I meant to vote for. And then you hit next,
Okay.
and it's going to ask you if you want to print out your card, which
Yes.
is yes. So now those selections that you made are being printed onto your ballot, and then it's going to come out right here. And it has the selections that you made, right?
Yes.
And so then, when you're done with this, then you'll take it over to our DS200 tabulator, and you'll put it right in there, and it will be counted along with all the rest of the ballots.
Okay.
I will take that from you. I can help you put it right in the machine. It's going to go in this top slot here,
Yes.
just like that. And it goes. And you're the first voter for this election. Do you want me to put the ballot?
Oh, I'll give it a shot.
All right, here we go. So this is how it goes, and then there's a little slot right here. That's where the slot goes, and so the ballot just goes right in there.
Okay, it's telling me now that and so there are some nice little accommodations. The card has a cut corner on the upper right-hand corner of the card. So, I don't know, did you know that? So
Yes.
a blind person would know immediately, as long as you said put it in with the right corner on the upper right, or the cut corner on the upper right, you'd be good to go. Now it's gonna scan. It's telling me that the card is scanning. Okay, so now it's telling me that so I can arrow down to go through the list. And I assume the up arrow to go back up the list, so we're gonna find out. I'm just actually orienting myself to the keyboard. It did not provide that, Carrie, interestingly enough. So this says DN for down, I assume that's down. This says TPO. And I don't know what that means. Is there a set of instructions that I'm supposed to be able to access?
I don't know. Let me see. Oh, TPO is tempo.
Okay.
So if you want it to speak either more quickly or more slowly, that's going to be your tempo button. Then there's a volume button.
REP, I assume is
Repeat. And then there's a button right at the top that's kind of stuck under the machine here.
SCR.
Screen button, and so what that does is it will darken the screen, so it will be like a privacy. So if you have a question you want to ask the poll worker while you're voting, you can put that on, and it will black out the screen so they can't see what you're doing on the screen.
Yeah, and this is it says BK
Back,
but on the button itself it says HM.
home, so that will take you back to the first screen.
So back home, so if you want to.
Right, so that I think will take you back to your first contest.
Okay, well, let's just go ahead and go down, and there's a little button down, oh, that's not a button.
So, Carrie, how does a voter with a disability like Mike's, you just walked him through what all of those buttons do. What will happen at a precinct polling place?
Well, if they have questions, and they could definitely ask the poll workers what any of those mean, because it's written on there also. They've abbreviated it to have the braille fit the keypad, but it will say tempo and volume and everything. And so if they have questions about what to do, they can ask the poll worker, and the poll worker can walk them through the way I did.
I'm surprised this doesn't include a key to what all all those buttons are, so that a poll worker would not have to do that.
Yes, and it doesn't. Now that you mention it, I'm kind of surprised it does too.
Okay, so
Does not.
I'm gonna go down. The Avengers, and it's a little quiet, so I'm gonna see if I can find the volume button here.
That's gonna be on the bottom.
That's tempo. That's down.
Whoops, it's one right below the tempo button.
It's below the tempo button.
Yep.
Oh, over there, VOL, there it is. And I assume it's a rocker switch. Okay. It's not giving any sort of output, so I guess I'll have to go down and fantastic. Okay.
And it starts out at a very low volume, so you'll probably have to hit it a few times.
The Incredibles, Justice League of America. So it's just listing them. Oh, it's gonna be a tough choice here between the Power Rangers and the Ninja Turtles, but I think we'll go back up here and I think we're gonna go get the Power Rangers. There we go. Now this, the middle button says select, S for select.
Mhm.
I have selected Power Rangers. I voted the contest, so now it's telling me to press the right arrow key. Favorite park in Johnson County. I only get to vote for one. So that's telling me to use a down arrow, so City Park, Hickory Hill, Hills Access, Muskingum. Oh yeah, I like that one. I think we're gonna go back up to Lake McBride. Good place to walk there. Continue, press the right arrow. Do I have an option if I wanted to go back and vote the previous contest?
Well, what will happen is you will come, yes, so
Let's
you can
just-
push
yeah,
the
I'll
back
just-
arrow.
Oh, I can press the back arrow
Yep.
for help at any time. Oh, how far would I go back? Oh, I went, okay. Now, okay, so that looked. Now I'm getting a summary. It's telling me to scroll through with the up and down arrow keys. I'm just reviewing them. And I got them, there's the correct, so I'm gonna go to the right. Turn to the machine and we're hopefully gonna get flush here and, come on, there it goes. I'm the second person to have voted.